This episode is sponsored by Monkey Stuff. Monkey Stuff makes things for makers. We're inspired every day by the craft and creativity of makers and design and manufacture tools and accessories to try to make your making life a bit more delightful. Our products are designed in California, by makers and for makers, and manufactured in the USA. Check out our line of pottery accessories and tools at monkeystuff.com. Follow us on Instagram to see what we're up to in our studios, and keep on making great things.
This episode is brought to you by Snow Farm, the New England Craft Program. Are you looking to take your ceramic skills to the next level? Check out the incredible 2 to 5 day workshop offerings at Snow Farm, where world-class ceramic artists lead hands-on immersive workshops in wheel throwing, hand building, surface design, and more. Whether you're just starting or refining your voice in clay, there's a workshop for you. Set in the stunning Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts, this residential craft school is the perfect place to create, connect, and get inspired. To register for a workshop today, visit snowfarm.org. Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 562 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today I'm joined by Lisa Naples, who returns to the show to talk about her recent exhibition, Grounded in Gold. After many years as a potter, she has embraced figurative and non-objective sculpture. In this interview, we talk about how she anthropomorphizes animals to show shifting relationships and identities, as well as the use of gold as a way to embody the divine in the recent exhibition. The show was on display last year at the Michener Art Museum in Doylestown, PA, and if you'd like to check out the work that we're talking about, you can see that on her website. That's lisanaples.com. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. I thought we would start talking about the bigger shift in your work from making functional pots that were pattern driven into making narrative sculpture. And I heard an artist talk that coincided with Grounded in Gold, which is at the Michener Museum. And you talked about how there was this sense that stories, this was probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago, stories started to bubble up in you that pots couldn't tell that story. Can you talk about the difference? Like, what's a good story that a pot can tell versus a story that a sculpture can tell?
Oh, now you're asking me to think. I said that, and I believe it's true. I make that joke because so much of this just happens in that wordless space, and you just know what to do. I would say it was more than 4 or 5 years ago, though. I think 16 years ago. Well, I had gone to Australia and done a residency, and that's when I started to narrate plates and narrate pots with rendered images, which was a huge step for me because I had just been working with pattern. I shouldn't say just. I mean, there's lots of gorgeous history. The ceramics of, like, the Minoans come to mind. But I wasn't using images because I didn't know how to draw. I just never got that training. I had an English degree undergrad, and when I was in Australia, I started drawing. And there's a lot of story behind that, which we don't need to go into. But I continued when I got home from Australia. I continued to work with the illustration and develop it, and the narrative words that were coming in conjunction with the illustrations. Some of these things were portrait plates of crows and ravens. But then after a few years, when I started to work with the figure, it was just like the story got bigger and bigger. And maybe it was, maybe Potts could have told those stories if I had greater rendering skills. I don't know, but the velocity, like that push inside of me, was strong. And for me to render in 3D is a whole lot easier. Not that I had any background in rendering in 3D, but I am 3D. No, we are 3D. So rendering in 3D, it just makes a lot more sense for my brain than trying to create an illusion of 3 dimensions in a two-dimensional plane. Well, because, also the function kind of then becomes part of the storytelling, and it doesn't have to be. Like these stories need the function. It's like a distraction. It's like too much information. And so the interesting thing is that I wondered at the time if I would relinquish making pottery ever, if it would come to that. That all started, I went to Australia in 2005. And so when I got back, that's when that whole process started. And it was probably 4 or 5 years later that I started working with the figure. And it hasn't abated. My interest in making pottery, I'm getting ready for a studio sale right now. That'll happen December 6th and 7th. And it's almost all pots. But I used to make deviled egg servers and soup tureens and jam service and salt and pepper sets. And I don't have an interest in making all of that anymore. It's like, it's complete, I guess you could say. It feels complete inside of me. So what I am making are illustrated cups and candle holders that have illustration, lots of things with illustration, or really complex darted flower holders, because I really do enjoy the complexity of dart cutting and the forms that seem endless that could come from that.
One of the things that I know is true is that you've been pretty fearless in terms of teaching yourselves new skills and putting it in public. Because it's one thing to sort of mess around in your studio and think, oh, I'm going to draw a bird on a pot. That's one thing. But then to say, no, I am definitively going to start a body of work or head in a direction in which not only do I need to be able to draw animals and figures in a situation, but that's going to be the whole thing. Like I'm not going to go the safe route and just make the little pots that sell well all the time. I'm going to take the big risk and make the thing that is new. Can you talk about sort of the fearlessness that's needed to follow the intuition that's natural as a mid-career artist?
I think that's a great question. And I can tell you from the bottom of my heart that I have more fear than anybody I know inside my field of awareness. And it's just that I hold that and the fearlessness together. I can hold both because it's just remarkable to me how much anxiety and fear, like even when I first made the first crow plate when I was in Australia, it was epic. Like it was it was this epic conflict within me. Like, oh my God, it's gonna suck. It's gonna be terrible. Because I was used to having this really refined body of work that had mass appeal, that was very successful. I could have kept making that my whole life. But here's what it boils down to for me, Ben, is a relationship to the unseen, energetic realm that we're all collaborating with. Anybody who is involved in that stream of creativity, which I just want to say is a life force. It's not for some. So I love when students come into the studio who want to learn and they say, well, I'm going to try your class, but I don't have any creativity. It's my favorite comment because I know that to be false. Because if you're walking and you're breathing and you're human, you have access to creativity. You just haven't had the right environment to explore it. So I can see I've gone adrift of your question a little bit here.
No, that's all right.
But it's all related. So it's faith. It's faith and trust and getting out of the way of. I did enough big shows like the Philly Craft Show or the Smithsonian Craft Show, those big blockbuster shows. I did enough of those to see that you make and you make and you make and you make your list and you're going to make all the things. And then there's like usually a couple weeks right at the end where you've finished your list and now you've got room to just make whatever is alive in you. And you're in a groove, right? Because you've been working really hard and lots of long hours. And so you make whatever that last thing is. And guess what sells first? It's that stuff. And so I saw that happen over and over again. And I thought, okay, so what if my value as an artist which is like a mouthpiece for creativity. It's like, or a handpiece for creativity. What if my greatest value is in just transmitting what's alive? What if that's really like, and that actually translates to putting food on the table? Maybe that does also translate to that. So let's test that out, you know? And so it's over the years, it was proven to me. It's not blind faith. For me, faith is that concept of blind faith, just put that outside of this conversation altogether because I needed proof and I saw it. I just saw it over and over again that when I was in my most authentic self and not creating for any expectation of what somebody wanted or what I thought I should make, but just really creating from that gut place or that, yeah, intuitive place. I made the things that were the most interesting to me, they turned out to be the most interesting to the audience. And also they led me to other things. So they were right in the center of the flow, you know? So I can trust that. I can really trust that. There's been plenty of times I've been in my studio and it's like, seriously? Really? That's what you want me to make? Okie dokie. You know, I trust it. And so I go, and in the interest of not leaving anything out, I'll go fully towards whatever drops into my mind. I have the idea that there's these things that drop in, they're not really coming from me. I have something to do with it for sure, but they're like dropping in. I don't even have words are very difficult around this kind of thing, but it's like they're dropping in from the field or they're dropping in from, I don't know. I think as soon as I would name it, I would kill it somehow. So I think it's enough words that people listening would get.
Well, I wanted to give an example of this. In 2020, you had a show at the Clay Studio. I think it was called Using the Sun to Find North. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Which actually I think people can relate to this intuitive sense with the idea of a compass. So when you look at a compass, you find magnetic north and you follow it. And you might be walking left or right, but as long as you eventually head back towards north, you will be able to go somewhere. And the metaphor that you used in this show was this idea of wayfinding. So not necessarily using a magnet, but just using like an inner direction between two things.
Mm.
Can you talk about this idea of wayfinding or like expand upon how wayfinding made those objects?
Yes. So that show was I was illustrating my life as I was living it. So that wall that you refer to, it illustrated an urban myth that I had heard probably 15 years earlier that never left my subconscious mind. And why did I need that show in the first place? Because I was going through a divorce after 27 years of marriage, and my kids were fledging off into their lives, my two girls. So I was dissolving, or two identities were being dissolved at the same time, mother and wife. I reached out to the Clay Studio because I had a history there and I didn't know the current staff, but I said, I need a container out on the horizon to put all this chaos and dreaming into. I just need that, and so will you support me? This is what's going on in my life. And they said yes. So the second they put that show on the horizon 2 years out, I knew I would be okay. Isn't it funny? It's kind of a similar thing with the Michener show. Like I couldn't have made that work if I didn't have the container. Just like I couldn't have made the work for using the sun to find north. And even that title, I came up with so many titles over the time, the first year of working on that show. And when it came time to start talking about a title for the show, Jen Zwilling, who's the curator there, I said, I think Unbreakable is the title. And she said, oh, no. M. Night Shyamalan made a movie called Unbreakable in Philadelphia. And I said, oh, well, was that recent? No, but everybody thinks of that movie. I'm like, give me a break. For a year I've come up with titles and that's my title. And she goes, find another one. So I literally went to a Google search engine and I put in, how do you find your way when you don't have a compass or a map? And it turns out there's like 12 chief ways how people do that. And the top one in all the searches is using the sun to find north. And so that's where the title came from. And so that wayfinding wall started with this, it was illustrating that legend where a hawk hits its midlife and it has to make a choice. It falls out of the sky just exhausted, flat on its back. and it has to make this choice. It either flies, the choices are go up to the top of the highest mountain. It's a bald spot, the top of the highest mountain. Pull out your talons, pull out your feathers, smash your beak on the rock. And if you do that, the legend says, everything will grow back full if you don't get picked off, because now you're prey. You're up on a bald spot of a mountain. If you do that, the legend says that you'll be rewarded with everything coming back fully. You'll have the wisdom of the first half of your life, and you'll have all your resources in full form. And the other choice is to do nothing. Just keep living your life. You can still hunt. You won't get as much prey as you could if you had better beak and better talons, but you'll still eat. But you'll start your decline. You'll start your spiral towards the end of your life. And so it was so interesting because that story stuck with me for all those years. It just in the background. And here it was, I was in this space where I was that hawk. And so I was thinking it was like virtue and vice, these two sides. It was like virtue and vice, coping strategies, or like if you're really fully conscious, what you would do. But the more I got into the making of that story, and P.S., by the way, when I decided I was going to make that whole series, I mean, some of those plates were they were as wide as my kiln. They were just gigantic plates. And when I decided I was going to make that, I asked the unseen, okay, how? What does it look like? Is it sculpture? What is it? It came back illustrated plates. And I was like, oh, sure, no problem. Like, I don't know how to draw. Like, are you kidding me? I really still struggle with drawing and painting. But at that time, it was like, okie dokie, I will do my best. I will break all my rules. I will do whatever I have to do to tell this story through illustrated plates. And I thought that was pretty interesting because it was such a challenge, but it really turned out to be a great way to illustrate. So it was like virtue and vice, virtue and vice. But the more that I made the things, I could see that it wasn't virtue and vice. It was just me doing the best that I could on any given day, given you know, my awareness that day. And when I made all the versions that was the coping strategy side, they made me laugh out loud. Remember, that show was in November of 2020. So I made that series last because it was the hardest of the whole show. So of course I left it to the last. So those months during COVID when I was locked down with strangers in my house. My kids were gone. I kept the house in the divorce. I needed to rent rooms. I had strangers in my house. I didn't have a single person who could touch me. Thank God I had my studio because I could go out there. And so I would be out there and I would make some of these, the different, I made like cue cards, like a storyboard of the pivotal moments that I was going to illustrate. And when I would make the coping strategy side, I would burst out laughing. I could not believe these images and the words that came to me because they all had poetry, not poetry, but like writing, narrative around the perimeters. And they just made me belly laugh. They were so funny. So these coping like for instance, she is cold. She's cold because her feathers are molting and she has to pluck out all her feathers on the virtue side, the so-called virtue side. But on the coping strategy side, she decides to go buy a fur coat because she's cold. So she goes to what I decided was called the more store. The more store. Just like, I don't care what it is, just give me more of it. Because that's what we do when we're like in this like frenzied coping strategy. It's like, no more chocolate ice cream, no more, more shopping or whatever it is. But that was so funny to put a hawk in a fur coat and have her out there shopping with her girlfriend, and her girlfriend's like, I love it. It just was, I don't know. I do find that I'm extremely grateful for my studio life every single day. I'm grateful that I get to go into a space that I also get to make my living there, partly, I make most of my living from teaching and running my business, but that's an incredible blessing.
How do you think telling these stories through animals disarms the viewer? Or do you think it disarms the viewer?
It absolutely disarms the viewer. When I decided I wanted to work with a figure, I looked for somebody teaching animal figures because I thought it was animals for me, and nobody was. And so Arthur Gonzalez was teaching human figures down at Penland. So I went down there and I took a workshop with Arthur, and I thought, humans can help tell a story, sure. So I get home and I've got all these human figures in my studio for my studio sale, and people literally walked in, saw them, commented about them, and backed away from them. I watched people physically back away from them and go over to the pottery. And I thought, well, gosh, that's interesting. It's too close. It's like too in your face. So I thought, okay, so let me really figure out how to make animals, and I'll tell the same exact stories, but with an animal figure. And it was like opening up a huge, universe because people talk. That Clay Studio show was so precious to me because it was November of 2020. People still couldn't be, people were still masked, but we could have 6 people at a time in the gallery because we could have that social distance. And I asked them if we could just make, like a schedule that people could sign up, have 3 half-hour segments every Saturday through the 6 week run of the show. And then people signed up for every single slot. People really wanted to be with each other. And if I had to choose between that and one giant opening where I couldn't finish a conversation with anybody, I would choose that because all those groups, we get to have these lovely conversations. And people said to me often, like, how can you share so much of your personal, like vulnerability, or it's kind of along the same lines as your question, as I recall. And the truth is, I think that I'm no different than you. I don't think I'm that special as like human beings are. We're all, we all want the same things. We all struggle in the same ways. I've done enough internal spiritual work to really, and been in sanghas enough to see that in a very real sense, I am you and you're me. It's a concept, but I don't have fear around that. It's one place I don't have fear is in sharing my internal being and process because you would think I'd be afraid of judgment because I certainly have that going on in other realms of my life, but I don't know. There's just some kind of certainty within me that I know that I'm not any different than anybody else. So if I can share something, if I can share my questions and what I find to be answers with other people, then isn't that a good thing? It always lights me up when other people do that and I get to benefit from it. So yeah,
Do you mind if I ask you a relationship question?
sure.
So one of the things I love about this Grounded in Gold show is that you are depicting very simple acts of acceptance or rejection through some of the pieces. Like one of the pieces, there's two rabbits or hares. One is facing away, one is kind of facing towards that one, but it's almost like a front to back. And there's this sense of like rejection or loss. And then there's other ones in which the rabbits are facing together. So there's this sense of like we're figuring it out together. So I think the question that I have is when you go through the end of a relationship and it changes your identity, how do you visually describe something so powerful but not overdo it? Because I feel like sometimes my instinct is the bigger the emotion, the more complex the piece needs to be. But I don't think that's the power in the pieces. The power is the pieces are relatively simple in concept, but they show some very powerful human emotions. So how have you been able to figure out how to put that relationship stuff into the work?
I'm really clear that what anybody else sees in that work is as valid as what I intended, because it's what that person needs to process and think about and noodle over. But I will tell you that those pieces aren't about two different people. They're all about me. They're all about my relationship with myself. So it's one vessel. It's one vessel that splits into two.
Okay.
So it's apparently two, but it's not two, it's one. And so these are all ways that I have noticed me relating to me, that human part of human being, the conflict, the split. There's two. So if there's two, then how how am I one if there's two? And in some cases there's three or four. Like there's a whole conversation going on in there. Somebody's criticizing somebody. And you say at the end of a relationship, your identity changes. And isn't that such a great thing to say? Like it's just such a great observation. Anything that can change isn't me. I don't come and go. Like the awareness, that's why people get into their 90s and they're like, I feel like I'm still what, 17. Their being didn't change, but all these other human qualities do change, and certainly the body changes. But you're asking a question about complexity and simplicity with regard to conveying a story. I feel like moving into the figure was such a huge, brave thing for me to risk away from the safe confines of function, even illustrated function. But then to leave the figure and move into the non-representational realm, which a lot of those pieces do. It's like when I work with the figure, I'm caring so much about the audience. I'm caring so much about conveying what it is I'm trying to convey. I'm a little bit in your business, trying to make sure you get it. And then when I work with the non-representational stuff, it's like getting out of your business and just trying to tell the truth in the most simple way possible. The essence quality. It's like the difference between a poem and a novella, maybe. I mean, here we are on a podcast, and it's very clear that I talk a lot. So it's ironic to say that I think that the fewer words you can use, the better. Which is why when I write or if I prepare something like that lecture I worked on for weeks, and I love how it all worked out, but it's hard to synthesize what I wanted to say down too.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of over 4,000 objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfieldcollection.com. Well, you did a really good job. The lecture was amazing, but then also at the end, a bunch of people were asking you questions. And one of the things that you responded to a question, which was about duality or polarity, maybe is a better way to say it, which goes back to what you're saying about, like, these stories are actually about my relationship with myself, not my relationship with an ex-partner or kids or whatever. But I'm going to read a quote back to you because this is the most succinct, off-the-cuff example of human nature I think I've ever heard. Like, it almost brought me to tears when you said this. Someone asked you a question about duality, and your response was, I find it really beautiful and confounding to be a human being, because so often something I think is true on further investigation isn't, or at least only it's partially true. And so that opens up the possibility that its opposite could also be true or has truth to it. And then you paused for a second and you said, so how do we navigate this life? When I watched that lecture, like, it just got me. So can you talk a little bit about how art making has allowed you to exist, like to exist spiritually, to exist emotionally?
It really touches my heart to hear that back, from you. And art making, I really don't know if I could survive this world if I couldn't, because I'm 60, I'm 64, and I started when I was 17, and I never stopped. So it's definitely part of how I understand the world, this practice. And that show, Grounded in Gold, was me asking questions about this dualistic experience of life, because that's what it is to be human, is to be in this dualistic right, wrong, yes, no, black, white world. And I've come to see that that isn't reality. That's not actually the truth. So, for instance, I needed to make that work. I couldn't make that work without a show, without a container. But once I had the container, I was willing to give up a lot of income. I stepped back from teaching because I really do feel, as much as possible, I'm in service to that, So I did that. I stepped back. I hired more people to teach at the studio. I bought a whole lot of gold luster, which was not inexpensive. And I made that work. And but it was asking a question about, am I more valuable? I'm going to put words to something that's really hard to put words to, so just bear with me. Um, so the one that's like seeing red and choosing not to involve, it's a little study where the one rabbit's white and it's staring, it's kind of holding its, choosing to focus its attention straight ahead. And the one that's red is in an emotional state. It's kind of screaming. They're facing each other more or less. They're not back to back. But even though the one's being screamed at, it's still choosing where it's placing its attention. It's not going to involve and get caught up in the mind. That's just the mind. It's not personal. It's not me, but it's been internalized from wherever. Um, and I can choose. I have the power to choose. As long as I have awareness, I have the power to choose. Now, I don't always have awareness, so I go off to the races quite a bit. Oh, 100 or 1,000 times a day. So the whole show is asking the question, is one good? It's like the wall at the clay studio. Is one virtue and one vice? Am I more valuable as a human being when I'm in presence than when I'm caught up in my mind, in emotion? And what I learned, just like the same thing I learned when I made that wall at the clay studio, I ended up putting it as a Vesica Pisces, which is basically a Venn diagram, because to put it like two rows would say one was better than the other. To put thought of all these different configurations of how to mount that show, and you couldn't mount it without saying one was better than the other, unless you put it like you could do it in this Vesica Pisces. And so it's the same. I guess I'm asking the same question, which is the first time I'm realizing this just in this conversation, that grounded in gold was kind of asking it again, like, is one better than the other? Am I okay? Am I good enough? Am I good if I lose my shit and do things that I later regret and have to learn from? It sounds so silly to say it out loud because of course you're okay. But what I really learned making that show was that we're all grounded in gold all the time. Awareness doesn't come and go. I mean, my awareness of awareness comes and goes, but it's like the sun. It's a cloudy day. Is the sun still there? Heck yeah. We can't see it, but it's still there. And so your divinity or the sacredness of being a human being, it's there. And you're just having an experience. And we cannot learn without mistakes. It's really like the best way to learn is by pushing the envelope and making mistakes. So an artist came to see the Michener show, a guy named Steve Tobin. He's such a brilliant artist. And he said his favorite poem is called Burnt Toast. And now I'll probably misquote it, but it's so simple. It's like, I burned my toast, 20 seconds less. And he said, I mean, this guy's internationally accomplished. His work he's broken world records for cast glass. He's like whatever. He's really prolific and beautiful artist. And he says that's kind of like what has guided him. He'll push past, and I do that too in a smaller scale. But if I don't find the edge, then I'm going to be wasting a lot of time and a lot of resources if I don't know where the edge is. So again, it's like holding both. There's the dialectic. It's like and meeting myself with understanding whenever it's called for. If I'm upset with me, if I'm yelling at me, the older I get, the more I'm sensitive to noticing that I'm doing that inside, that there's some kind of a thing running inside of me that's criticizing me or something, and then I can stop what I'm doing because it's more important for me to meet myself with understanding than it is to respond to somebody who's got a whip at my back, somebody being me also, it's just all an inside job, Ben. Like I can't be kind to you if I'm not kind to me. I can't be genuine with the world if I'm not genuine with me. All I'm doing is holding up an image and it's too painful to me. Maybe it's just because I am a very sensitive person, but the older I get, it's so painful to me to even be around people that are in persona and just it's false. And I mean, but that is so much of our world. I don't want to live from there myself, and I don't want to hang out with people who live from there.
Well, I think so much of what you're saying is about the aging of an artist because I've interviewed hundreds of people for this show. And one thing I've realized is that younger artists often listen to the part of themselves that's self critical because it is motivational. Like you can sort of beat yourself into submission and accomplish things and be rewarded in the clay community. And I see this with people that have too many exhibitions, like their personal life is a mess, but their professional life is amazing. And they basically beat themselves into working faster, working harder, taking on more, 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 more. And as artists age, I've realized that the older artists I talk to often talk about that runs out. Like the momentum of that runs out eventually. And there has to be a strong cultivation of self-love, or maybe that sounds too trite, a non-critical voice, like to cultivate a non-critical voice to even continue as an artist.
Well, I would say embrace that term self-love. It is profoundly important that you love yourself. I think it's rare. I think it's really rare. And I can find what you're saying in my early part of my career. I came from a big family and achievement. I mean, I distinguished myself from my very accomplished siblings by being good at clay. But I had a punishing work ethic, really punishing work ethic. And and I know that at some point, and it is the aging process and the maturation that comes with aging, eventually you realize that you can't be making things for other people. And it's not that I'm making them for me. I'm making them to edify something. Like I need to understand something. And I'm making them because it's like the breadcrumb trail of creativity. So I'm engaged with that thing. And that's holy smokes. I mean, of all the things you could have in your life, great relationship, wonderful kids, wealth, financial wealth, meaningful life, meaningful work, that's a pretty good one, meaningful work, something. And then to be able to teach, to run a teaching studio is an incredible blessing, for me, as much as for all the people that come and partake in it. So yeah, self-love, something. It's also a need. I find that when young people come to me and they say, I really want to be an artist, but I also am interested in, fill in the blank, whatever the other thing is, I'll always tell them, go do that. If you have a choice, go do that. Because honestly, I didn't feel like I had a choice. And I think it's so hard to be an artist in this culture. Chances are it won't take care of you exclusively on its own financially. So you'll have to be scrappy and work harder than a lot of people, But the wealth, if you can measure wealth in different ways, not just financially, but enjoying your days, this comment, living for the weekend, what does that mean? People are dying during the week? I don't want to do that. But yeah, I think that different things are motivating us at different times in our life. Yeah. And I take really good care of my body at this point too, because I want to keep doing this as long as I'm alive. To your point earlier, like it's just part of who we are. I feel that need to take care of my body so that I can continue to walk out to the studio and wedge clay and do all the things. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to bring in the conversation. We can wrap up the interview with this topic, but the idea of the community studio, because you established, I mean, you had taught tons of workshops in other people's studios for years and years and years, and taught in a lot of different environments. But then you founded your own studio and taught for years in Doylestown, and then later moved that studio. So how do you move a community? Because it's hard to get a community studio going and then to move it, it's almost like you got to do it again.
Yeah, you do. You do have to do it again. And I'm a half an hour from where I was, but this is a much more public studio. And I did retain a lot of people that lived in enough proximity. I moved closer to some of my audience and further away from some. So I retained a lot of people from the Doylestown days, but we have room for a much bigger. So there's about 70 people a week coming through when we have classes, when we have like the ongoing community classes. Um, and I can't really hold more than that. So that feels like it's a pretty rich amount of people. But I don't recommend moving a studio and a home and a classroom all at once. It was really a lot. But I was lucky to have found a studio to rent so I didn't have to own the whole thing, because owning the whole thing is, I don't want all that responsibility at this point in my life. But if you've got the goods, you know, I know I have the goods. I know that I can love the heck out of people, meaning be honest with them. Not everybody's a good fit for my studio, and that's okay. That's okay. But I've gotten clearer and clearer about where the boundaries are for me and what I have built and want to protect. And people are really grateful that there's somebody showing up who's going to keep that vibe intact. So people come from there's people that come from an hour and 15 minutes away to take a weekly class, which I find just astonishing. But it's because there are shops closer, but they're not run in a way that matches these folks. And so I'm sure that a lot of people could come to my studio that don't come to my studio, and you know what I mean? Like we all find our people. We all find what's good, what works for us and what feels synchronistic and whatever compatible. So I feel like right now we've got a great crew of people. And oh my gosh, the work that they're making. I just sent emails out this morning and I said, okay, the day before the studio sale opens to the public, I want all four of the big windows in front of my studio to be student work. I want to be able to show the community what you guys have been making this year because I've been in Frenchtown. This is my fifth year running the studio from here, and it's amazing what people are making. I'm very impressed and energized and inspired by the variety and the dedication of what people are doing here. They're at this point they're veering off into their own iterations and developing their own conversation with that internal back and forth, which is where I hope to take people. It's one thing to teach skill, and that's really, really critical, important, but to get them to the point where they can be in conversation within themselves and follow their own threads, that's the juice, you know. Yeah.
Well, part of your personal practice is that you work at low fire, and the studio is also low fire, which is pretty rare. I mean, I see so many studios that are cone 6 and cone 10, but everything you do is what, cone 2 or below?
Cone one, cone two.
Have you noticed anything different about having a dedicated low fire space?
Well, I wouldn't notice anything different because I've never, well, I guess I worked in those spaces like the clay studio. By the time I was there, though, I was firing my own kilns. But when I was in school at PCA, Philadelphia College of Art, that was a Cone 6 studio, but I was an independent student. So at that time, I was actually working at Cone 10. And, once I finally landed on earthenware, red clay, I was working at '04 for years until I woke up to the virtues of firing my clay to its mature temperature, which turned out to be about 100 degrees hotter. So Cone 1. So I don't have a problem. Sometimes people ask if they can work in a different clay and then take it home and fire it. It's pretty rare, but people do ask that. And I say, sure, you can take it home and fire it. Can we bring different clay in for you to fire? No. That's what I mean. Like, it's a beautiful thing to be clear about your boundaries and to be comfortable asserting them. Because it's also, my clay has less than 1% absorption at Cone 1. I think it's pretty much as strong as any other clay. The people are, and that's something I learned from Carla Wagner, the engineer that helped me develop Satin Clear. She just was so great because I'll never forget the day she said, because I was saying the earthenware was not as strong as porcelain or stoneware, and she said, "Why would you say that?" Now she's the head ceramist at Dow Tile, so I know she's an engineer and she knows I said, "Well, why would you say that?" And I said, well, why did they make the space shuttle nails out of porcelain? Probably for some thermal property, she said. It's just you fire any clay to its, and what is this term earthenware and stoneware? She's like, there's white clay bodies and red clay bodies. What properties do you want them to have? It was so liberating working with her And she's the one who got me to go to Cone One because she realized that what I wanted in a clear glaze was chemical magic from an electric kiln. Once we finally got past all the vernacular and the, cliched ways of speaking, and I could speak in an engineering in a way that an engineer could understand me, that's where we started to work on that glaze. So I don't have a problem. People love the clay. I've actually started letting the ceramic shop in Norristown sell my clay, actually a number of years ago now, because it's nicer than any commercial red clay that I have found. I mean, it's just more plastic. It's so forgiving. You can make sculpture with it. You can make pottery with it. You can throw with it. It's just very versatile and lovely. So so sometimes students will say, "Well, I want to do this kind of firing and I want to do that kind of firing." And I say, "Good, there's lots of studios you can go to. I'm not a university. All I can offer you is what I know. And I will offer that to you unfettered. Like you can have all of it. I'll give you everything that I know, but I won't try to be something that I'm not. So I'm not going to try to be showing you how to wood fire and salt fire and soda fire and raku fire. But if there's other people around who want to do that, and there are, and so one of my students has a raku kiln, so she has parties and they do raku, and that's great. So yeah, I feel like, don't you think ceramics is like a universe, a multiverse? And so we center in on our little universe, but even within that universe of Cone One, this custom clay body, these surfaces, it's kind of endless. I will not exhaust it in my lifetime. I find that I'm reeling people in a lot. People want to try this and they want to try that and they want to do this and they want to stay sort of shallow across a lot of variety. And I say, go deep in one spot. Go deep in one spot. And by doing that, you're going to learn so much about all these other things. But I find when people want to just stay on the surface and do a lot of things, that's resistance. I associate that with resistance because it's hard to stay. Because then you have to face failure. Then you have to face, I don't know what I'm doing. Then you have to face, haven't got any idea. Like, how do I motivate? Like, where does that come from? Like you have to face all the things that are required if you're going to make a life at this.
Well, this has been so good. It's been so good to talk to you. I want to thank you for coming on the show. And I forgot, we got to plug the Princeton Pottery Festival, which is something that we've both been a part of. It's happening in May of this year, and I'm so glad you're going to be a part of that again.
I'm thrilled to be part of it, Ben. And just for the audience sake, I just want to say that you and your team knocked it out of the park for the first year last year. Knocked it out of the park. I was so impressed with the venue, the crowd, the quality of the potters. It's built to last, and it's a really great show to come to if you have any interest at all in functional pots. So I'm very honored to be part of it, and really looking forward to it again.
Can you leave your social media as well as your website so that people can see more of the work we talked about today?
Sure. My website is just my name, lisanaples.com. Naples spelled like the city. At Lisa Naples Ceramics is my Instagram.
Well, thanks so much. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Ben. Good to see you too.
I'd like to thank Lisa for coming on the show. And as you heard at the end, she will be a part of the Princeton Pottery Festival that's happening May the 2nd and 3rd at the Princeton Day School. It's going to be a great event. This is our second year, and I'm looking forward to seeing y'all out there as we have 12 artists this year. So make sure to check that out if you're in the Northeast. Again, the website for that is PrincetonPotteryFestival.com. Also wanted to take a moment and thank our sponsors. That's Monkey Stuff, the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art, and Snow Farm, the New England Craft Program. If you or your organization is interested in becoming a sponsor on this show, you can get in touch at talesofredclayrambler.com. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.